Hey listeners, Mallory Wilsey here, Chief Producer of the Enrollify Network. I get the privilege of working alongside all of our creators at Enrollify, but I wanted to take just a quick moment to tell you about why I love the Talking Tactics podcast hosted by Diana Kibbolds. Every other Tuesday, Day drops a new episode where she focuses on a single tactic that moved the needle on any enrollment metric, from inquiries and booth visitors to apps completed and deposits, even registrations, you name it. The catch? The tactic had to be done with limited resources, either by a single person or a small but mighty team, or limited time, or maybe without a lot of money. The podcast format is fun and engaging, and it's just different from the more traditional 60-minute interview style shows. If you work in enrollment management or marketing, be sure to give Day's show a listen. You can subscribe to the show by visiting podcast.enrollify.org or just search Talking Tactics wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey everybody, welcome to Generation AI, the podcast where we demystify artificial intelligence in the world of higher ed. I'm your host, Ardis and joined by my very geeky co-host right now, insightful co-host, JC Bonilla. He's doing a lot of work with his team on data, and I was really interested. So JC, tell me some of the things that you were telling me before this episode. Like, what are you doing with your team right now?
Hello, everybody. I thought you said geeky because I have glasses. As I become 47, I cannot see shit. So now I have my gigantic reading glasses on professorial vibes.
You look more professorial for sure.
One of the things that, I did academically in my last years running a program at CUSP, New York University Center for Urban Science and Progress, is that we brought people to basically solve challenges. And, they call them hacks and whatnot. We call them weak immersions, and really interesting. Fast forward to data kind, an organization that I spent about 3 years on. We did a lot of challenges around data for good. We brought data scientists and we tried to solve really complicated problems. So how does that apply to the workplace today? What I found is that you and I, technical people, and everyone in this room or in this audio, if you're doing technical problems, you're spending like an hour on them, and then you walk away. Mm-hmm. The opportunity to do depth, it's so limited. So once a quarter, I bring all my team for a whole day, and we pick 2 problems that we're trying to solve, and we go at them. So think about visualization, kind of business intelligence problems. So we're spending half a day on that. Specifically, how we do these very complicated joins for health reporting that mix data sources from, vendors, platforms, and whatnot. And then I also get to teach a new capability for prediction and forecasting. So I'm teaching how do we do forecast time series analysis so we can predict where we're going to be 2 weeks from before the reports are due, so we can design interventions. So super fun, but the ability to do deep work, creating community, have a drink afterwards, it's just basically so important. So I recommend everybody to do it. Artists, the Element crew should be doing these deep dives once a quarter somehow, and fix the problems that you're trying to fix that require more than an hour.
I get so much energy from trying to look at problems and trying to fix problems and looking at those things. Like I get a lot of energy out of it. Like that's really where I'm really in my element. But it was interesting. You were as we were talking, you mentioned you like to give these problems or data sets that you use names. And I remember one of the data sets that you used when we had enrollment analytics course that we ran together was Tonka, right? So it was the data set, the play data set. Yeah. It was cool because it was you're kind of playing with Legos, and Tonka was kind of the...
It's a car, right?
Car.
Remember that? Yeah. Remember the big old trucks.
I'm pretty sure you have other ones, you have other names for your new data sets.
Naming conventions on products and initiatives, even sometimes a Google Sheet or a Google Excel file that is so meaningful. Right now I'm calling it Hero because I look at it. So it's so important because it allows the teams to go and create an artifact of where is this at and things like that. So today I'm showcasing Norma. It's our forecaster, and it's basically... Artists, why are we talking about this? But anyway, so Norma is a forecaster. And when you forecast, right, you need to actually look for the norm in the signature. And to do the norm, you have to remove the anomalies. So norm A. And by the way, if you hear the screams, that's my team. That's analytics people right now having fun. Who knew that nerds were so cool? Anyway, so norma, it's basically a norm that takes anomalies, but also reminds me of not reminds me, it's actually the name of one of my favorite high school teachers, Norma. And she was great at interventions. And models are as good as the usage. So the applicability of a model, Norma, is to create an intervention so our clients' partnership teams can go as 2 weeks before and say, oh my gosh, we're having the best month, so let's celebrate and create the report that way. Or we have 2 weeks to make an intervention because it's looking shitty. So creating those type of interventions, right? Remember when we did our predictive models, people just used to do catalogs and mailing catalogs and all that mathematical machinery to basically tell you, should you get a view book or not? But that's basically adoption.
Yeah, that was really interesting, like how we put all that work, and people were spending, hundreds of thousands of dollars on building predictive models just so they could reduce and say, hey, who's the top 20% of our students who are most likely to come in here? And guess what we're going to do? We're just going to send them a new catalog because that's how they modeled it. But yeah, it's very interesting. Well, today we're going to have a really interesting topic.
Well, the topic is not memories of Ardis and JC. That's not the topic today.
So we're gonna move away from the AI world of predictive AI, and we're gonna talk about generative AI.
Oh my gosh, you just fast forward 10 years, or in today's terms, 2 months.
2 months.
2 weeks. Like, what's happening, right?
Exactly. So we talked about this topic before, and JC, maybe you can kind of give us a little bit of an insight, but we're going to talk about AI overviews and specifically Google AI overviews. We want to go a little bit deeper and kind of understand like what's the, like what's happening there. But a lot of you might have noticed that Google now, you have a purple, green, or some kind of block when you're doing a search on how do I do X or how do you do Y. You're getting an AI overview as a generative AI component on your Google searches. And that's super interesting. Lots of drama there, lots from a technical perspective. But let's just, unpack that.
Yeah, it's a very interesting couple of weeks for Google because as they reshape this search experience, we must remember where it comes from, because the best way to understand our destination, right, is if we know where we're coming from. So remember today in a Google search Chrome experience, right, you're going to type in what is the best way to do a forecaster, and it's going to give you links. And sometimes in the bottom, there's going to be recommendations that summarizes what that is happening, right? Where that comes from, it's from the monetization angle of search. So it so happens that if you were to Google something or search for something, people realize that there are searches that were very common that would highly rank you ahead. So for example, one of the most common searches was, when is the Super Bowl today? And where can I see the Super Bowl? Literally. So all of a sudden, the Washington Post realized, if I make a blog post or a commentary that tells me the time of the Super Bowl, it's going to soar up in the search because everyone is searching. And then all of a sudden, like, all that traffic gets moved from Google to the Washington Post.
Yes.
Millions of dollars are being transferred. So
exactly.
For about 5-10 years, that's how it worked. Search was basically ping to the opportunity to go somewhere else. And it was about basically understanding where search is going. So Google realizes, what if we just don't drive that traffic? We actually summarize where this search is going. So they started basically bringing these summaries in a non-generative AI way forward. So all of a sudden, when is the Super Bowl? And then you can come and see it. When you start basically, and it kind of looks like these boxes that, may have the picture of someone. Sometimes they're going to be on the bottom. But what has happened in the past 2 weeks?
So those were summaries, right? Those we're talking about. They were called summaries. Yeah.
Yeah, summaries. Now, what has happened in terms of the product feature is that Google introduces AI overviews. So it's taking that initiative to the next level. And it did not go well. So, Ardis, can you kind of tell us the narrative of what are these Google overviews, how they work? I can give you the historical perspective. And also, I believe that Perplexity is actually doing next-gen overviews, right? So paint the picture of where this is at today.
Yeah, so I think we had an episode about this. We called them, and this was in the experimental stage when we talked about this, where Google kind of signaled that they were going to do this, and they're calling them Google Search Generative Experience, right? SGE. We had an episode about like how they work and kind of what's the implications can be, but essentially Google is just generating as if you were to go to ChatGPT and ask a question and ChatGPT were to give you an answer. Google is trying to do that, but pulling and anchoring that information on real content. So essentially they're going to their index of content, they're pulling that content in and saying, answer this question based on the content that I'm pulling in here. So that's what AI overviews are really answering your question in a generative AI way and putting that into your experience so you don't have to go now to another site and get that answer.
Right.
Perplexity was the first one. Perplexity, for those of you who don't know, Perplexity, we talked about Perplexity. It's one of our favorite tools in here. Lots of news happening around that as well.
I've been converted. Thanks to you, I've been converted.
Yeah. By the way, Perplexity had their first major commercial on the finals, NBA finals last night. And I was like, what? Perplexity? How does that make sense? You know, this is like a Super Bowl type moment, but they had a commercial and trying to move into the mainstream because they see that the combination of generative AI or ChatGPT experience grounded in a search index, right, which is Google,
right,
can make a very powerful experience, which is getting answers without having to go to each link to see if you cannot find the answer in that particular link. So that's what Google is trying to do with overviews right now.
Yeah. So let's give our friends a bit of context, examples of what has happened with this deployment of Google AI Overview. So, Ardis, I'm going to do the first one, and then I'm going to scroll down, and you can do the second one. So, on the Google search, blinker not making sound fluid. All right, that's the search. The AI Overview says, oh, that blinker is not making sound could be caused by low blinker fluid, a bad connector, or a faulty amplifier, right? So you start getting, an explanation why this is happening, and it's being indexed, it's being reproduced by the thousands and thousands of links that tell you what is the connection between blinker not making the sound. So, Ardis, I know you're seeing this for the first time. Just read them. What is the search and what are you seeing on the overview?
Parentheses, running with scissors and health benefits.
What is Google telling you?
So running with scissors is a cardio exercise that some say is effective and semi-controversial. Laughing, which is part of running with scissors, can have physical benefits such as boosting the immune system, improving blood flow, and providing a mild facial muscle exercise.
Immediately tell your kids to please go run with scissors because Google is telling you that it's a good immune blood motivating system.
Wow. Okay.
All right, let's go to the next one. Let's do two more. Create background with image paint. Here are some steps to create a background with an image in Microsoft Paint. Remember Microsoft Paint? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Open the file you want to use in Paint, rotate the image 180 degrees, drag down a small box to extend the image border, and 4, use the paint bucket icon to fill in the white space with color. That's how you do a paint picture in 1995 vibes. Or Ardis.
This one is interesting. A southernmost point in mainland Alaska. That's the search query. Southernmost point in mainland Alaska, and this is the AI overview, is the tip of...
Pronounce that.
I don't even know how to pronounce that.
Amatignac? I don't know. Amatignac?
Aleutian chain, which is located at blah, blah, blah. The island also is the westernmost point in Alaska, North America, and the United States. So I can't really pronounce those names, but yeah.
I mean, in all these things are basically a reflection, in funny ways, of some of the inaccuracies and misrepresentations that Google AI overviews is generating. Number one, erroneous responses. Why? Because it's looking at data and it's trying to surface based on algorithmic, AI type of mindset. This is meaningful, this is user generated, whatnot, and giving you a response. And number one, the misinterpretation of context, it's real, right? So think about a summary that is incorrect. Think about a summary that is telling me, run with scissors because it's healthy. So the first thing that we need to do and understand is that these AI summaries, they were funny, but they were incorrect. Why and how that's taking place is really, really interesting. So let's go and unpack why this is taking place. Number one, Ardis, you asked me a question about models early on, right? And I responded with Norma. And then the whole implication of why Norma was a product name that I chose for a mathematical technique, but the sarcasm on how I went back to a high school teacher is very nuanced.
Yes.
So the first thing that we need to remember is that these algos are trained with user-generated content. And there's so much stuff there that it's hard to pick up. So Ardis, what do you think when we think about user-generated content as the source of input for these type of models, that the nuance of satiric challenges that we have in our communication? So what do you think about this?
Yeah. I mean, look, one of the examples that some folks were talking about is that AI or Google doesn't know the onion, right? So you use the onion and it's like, it's a very, very interesting news source. And obviously there's a lot of, satire in there. If you don't know the onion, highly recommend you go take a look at it. Very funny. But it doesn't distinguish between the onion, like you said, like satire or like a fiction or fact. And in a lot of cases, that's an area where Google stumbled upon, right? It's like they didn't consider that component of it. So if you look at what they're doing, and of course, it can be much more complicated than this behind the scenes, but they're doing RAG, what we called, remember we talked about how chatbots and AI systems, like where are they getting that information from? And they need to be grounded in our content. So they're doing retrieval augmented generation, meaning there's a search that happens, the algorithm tries to find the intent of that or changes it, and then semantically goes look at the corpus of information of the storage. In this case, Google has the whole internet as the source of that information. And I don't know if the teams there went deep enough to figure out, okay, we need to make sure that we weight very different sources differently in terms of factual information or what the intent is. So they didn't, maybe they did, maybe they didn't, maybe they did, again, around the testing, but they have this whole source of the internet. And then guess what? The Onion has a lot of traffic, so they rank pretty high. So if they're just using the algorithm to say, I'm just going to pull out the first top 10 links that would come in, and I'm just going to take their content and then summarize it, rather than summarize it and do kind of a preview, I'm going to give them the whole overview based on their content. So you're going to get the garbage, or you're going to get the satire, or you're going to get the misinformation that those first 10 links gave you.
Remember Sarah Palin?
Yeah.
Running VP in, I think, 2000 or something like that, right? So I can see Russia from my house, Alaska, Russia, proximity and whatnot. So that gets indexed, recalled 1,005,000 times. So all of a sudden, how does the algo knows that that is basically not a
factual,
good or a good geographical representation of distance, right? Because what she was trying to hint is that Alaska is so close to Russia, right? And she's using it to her aspirations in globality and things like that. Nevertheless, it was a disaster in terms of PR and what it meant for her. But how does the algo know that? And one of the important points that Ardis, you just brought up, is that these algos, these LLMs have they actually ingested everything they can. They finished the web and they ingested thousands and millions of books. How does it know that this book is historically fiction versus historically accurate? And all those nuances. So it will require a second layer of validation, probably a human touch that says labeled accurate, inaccurate, fake, and whatnot. And that type of taxonomy, it's very difficult to scale.
That's a lot of work. I mean, that's incredible amount of work. So how do we got to use machines to do that. I just don't know how that's going to work, right?
And this gets compounded with the second problem that we discuss here, right? These algos are known, right, for having these hallucination aspects, right? That it has an incentive to predict, right? And then sometimes that prediction is going to create just a ridiculous prediction, right? So one of the things that we're going to be talking about in other episodes is certain features that the algos have a dynamic generative process that it looks at what is predicted. So in other words, gets a prompt, reads what it outputs and it knows if it's crazy or not, right? But today, the state of the art is just has an incentive to produce and predict, and those predictions can be crazy, but there they are on the wild, right? And this all comes for flow data sources. So it's a compounding effect on user-generated content hallucinations. So what do you end up with? Running with scissors. It's a good cardio exercise.
Yeah, there's both of those things. So like just not having a good source of grounding data, it's certainly a problem. So I don't think it's intrinsic as part of the LLMs, the way you use these large language models, right? Because that's what we're using here. So the large language models, you don't use them for factual information. You use them to do the summarization, to as the reasoning engine, but you have to ground their information on something else. And Google didn't do a good job of managing their RAG system in order to bubble up the relevant information based on that question, right? So they weren't able to pull up the right information based on that question.
Hey, it's Mallory, Chief Strategist of Enrollify. Why travel far when an exceptional higher ed conference experience awaits from the comfort of your campus or home office? I'm thrilled to announce that every single session at the 2024 Engage Summit will be live streamed. And the best part? Registration is free. Many of your favorite Enrollify creators are presenting. Maya Demishkovich and Jenny Lee Fowler will teach you how to craft an AI-powered social media influencer strategy. Jamie Hunt will help you unlock the AI revolution in your team. And Shane Baglini and Allison Tercio are teaming up to boost your productivity with generative AI. Plan out your dream conference by scoping out the agenda and taking note of the sessions you want to tune in for. Visit engage.element451.com and register yourself and your team for free today. Now, back to the show.
It's important to note, Ardis, that these features were not massively released. So, one of the things that Google can do as a product company is that subsets, these features to, some people. So this data that we are going to showcase, it's not hardcore set in stone, but it's a really interesting preview of what happens. What these outputs are generating in terms of experience and visibility, it's actually a drop in visibility. What does that mean? That apparently about 85% of the queries during this experimental phase, right, let me read this again. Visibility drop. Due to these issues, the visibility of the AI overviews has significantly dropped, initially appearing in 84% of the queries in the experimental phase, and potentially going to about 15%. So it's a really interesting experiment because it starts showcasing a behavior that we know that when we search today, I am going to be in a quest for finding the right link. But the reason why Google is Google, in Yahoo and AltaVista and all these, first-gen search engines is because what he put in 1, 2, 3, 4 were really goddamn links that answered the query at hand. So now something gets tricky there, right? And it's like, can I trust this? So the visibility is basically an artifact of trust, where I go and how I start consuming that information. What's your take on reduced visibility and usage here?
I mean, we talked about this before, that the traffic to those sites is going to plummet. Now, Google might not have figured this out today, and there's some tweaks that they're making. So basically, they pulled it back, but this is the future. This is absolutely the future. So the visibility to your sites and the traffic that Google is sending there is going to drop drastically. That's what Sundar Pichai said. Like, there was a Bloomberg interview, and we talked about this a little bit before. But essentially, one of the things that he mentioned is that we need to give the end user the best experience, and if it's an answer that they're looking for, we're going to give them that answer, and then we're going to figure out how to monetize and how not to cannibalize our business that we have right now to send links to your website. So we're going to need to figure that out. They haven't figured it out yet, but essentially he's like, if we don't do it, then somebody else will. So we have to move along and do what the consumer wants. But he's saying Google has a massive advantage because they have indexed the whole internet and they know all the relationships, and they know all the knowledge of the internet, so they can, do a better job at those overviews of those answers than somebody else. So that's to be seen, but that's kind of where we are. So the future is going to be that your site traffic is going to drop from Google organic for sure. I don't know if it's going to be 25%, 30%, 40%. We don't know, but increasingly it's going to drop. And we also see other competitors like OpenAI, for example. We talked that they might introduce a Google competitor like search on ChatGPT, where it's using the internet as well in order to bring in that context of real-time information. And that's what Perplexity is. It's like that Perplexity, we're seeing it. It's now has a valuation of, I think it raised it like was it 3 billion or 6 billion? It raised that the last round of money. So everybody's thinking that this is the future, and Google needs to capture and needs to be the leader in that. Otherwise, it's going to lose market share and eyeballs to those other sites.
It's revolutionary. It's got problems, but certainly interesting, and it's doomed to happen. Google's responses to these ideas, as you can imagine, so they're going to be making technical updates. But one of the important things that I know they will be deployed, and you and I can do a whole episode on this, is that there will be content restrictions. It's impossible to throw humans to label all these things. So there's probably going to be algorithmic software approaches to doing these restrictions, but not all the content can be surfaced. And how hard it is to pick up satiric, user-generated content that is fake and blah, 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 blah. All these permutations that make our speech and writing written language nuanced. That's what basically content restriction is all about.
Yeah. A lot of folks are basically saying, hey, this is actually bubbling up a lot of that garbage content that's out there. And it's putting it in the same level playing field as some of the more important news sources and information sources. And there is really no ability for us to check and verify like where this thing came from. And nobody's going to do that. So it's like we're trusting Google to give us the right answers and to give us the right results. And we're not going to check where it came from because it's Google, right? It's like it's always really, really good, but it's actually bubbling up a lot of that garbage. Do you think you're going to see a lot more content that is being produced by Gen AI? So like the whole SEO game is going to change drastically, right? Because now if you're not in that first 2 or 3 responses around that particular question, like you said, what happens to you? Like what happens to your content? Like how do you drive traffic? You have to go to other channels, right?
The second derivative, which is what you're talking about, right? If Google basically doesn't have the visibility, right? So they're going to try to capture it and have you not leave. It's a Michael Dell play here. Michael Dell was the first one who created this website that didn't have exit button, so you don't basically bounce off, right? So we're going to be trapped in the Google experience as consumers. So the second derivative is, how do I start basically creating content that is indexable, right? In reference, because it's about the reference, in the training that the LLM has picked up, right? And it gets surfaced. So that's going to be very interesting, because what I'm seeing is when I ask for a prompt in an AI overview, it references 5, 6, 7 sources, right? So what about the remaining 10,000 sources that kind of have a point of view on that? How is the algo, how is the generative AI going to select 5 out of a million, or 1,000, or an incredible number? I do not know.
Didn't you say that you're only going to the first 3? Like you're like, I know Google is so good that I know that the first 2 or 3 are going to answer my question.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So it's like, it's just an evolution, right?
So basically, the evolution could be that, trying to answer the second derivative, I am now a content creator. I'm company X and I have a monetization exercise, right? So I want to continue to basically be nested in that organic rank really high. So I get picked because potentially the monetization could be, if the LLM reference you get $1, right?
Interesting. Okay.
And if you click on that thing, you get $2 type of thing, right? So I'm assuming that's what's going to happen. They will continue, but really the scroll down page 2 where I didn't find it and it happens a little bit. That's buried. That's gone. That's gone.
Do you think advertising will be even more important now with Google because people are going to just referencing these AI overviews, and you're not going to have the ability to get those eyeballs? But if you pay for it, then Google will bring you a result alongside the organic answer.
Not only is going to change, but then I'm going to bring my Gary V vibes, right? It's all about attention. And what Google is perfecting, it's this attention grab on the search experience that didn't exist before. I search, I get a list, I leave. Now I search, I get a summary, I'm staying. I continue, I see the picture, I'm staying. So all of a sudden my in-browser experience got extended 10x. So I have a captive audience, and what I want to do is have commercials, social media ads that are native to the search environment, point in time. So all of a sudden, you have this incredible delivery that it's nature to the attention in the browser experience. So I really think that it's interesting, because the other thing is, think about what is happening in the organic kind of search monetization. It's text-based, right? And then the ads are not exciting. It's super flat, meaning, the right header is supposed to be what captures you. Now you should have probably a multimodal experience. So I could get the video, I could get the banner and all those type of things,
right,
totally linked to the experience. So I think it's really, really interesting. And us, advertisers, are probably going to milk that. That's the thing that we're really good at. We know how to sell shit, and we adapt to the environment to sell whatever we're trying to sell, right? And that's the exciting part.
Yeah. We adapt really quickly to the platforms, right? So being on the platform, but think about it this way: like what Google has, even the demos that they provide during their conferences and things like that, the whole experience. It's like you interact with an agent, and then they always go back to the shopping experience, the shopping thing. And it's like, okay, you're giving an answer, but a lot of those answers can be around recommending a particular service or a product or something along those lines. So if you're paying Google, then the connection between that answer and a deep catalog to your product or to the thing that you're trying to sell in your ad can be even more closer together to that answer. So you can, it kind of the experience of showing that in line as a recommendation can be even more powerful. I think that's where some of that will go. So you won't have like 20 different recommendations, but you're going to have one recommendations or two, and then they're going to be see more. So it's going to be in the context of your answer.
I just thought of an application that I think is super interesting. Put yourself in a supermarket, and you're going to notice two things. The milk is at the very end because, it's a high traffic item. So the retail wants to take you there. So in the process, you grab something else. But then check out, and you'll see that in supermarkets or any type of retail, gum, magazines, these high consumption, mindless type of objects that you're going to get that make your shopping cart, increase $10 or whatever. That behavior. Now think about the search experience where scissors is what I'm searching for, and athletic content comes in. So all of a sudden what I have is a little scissor is being visualized. You want to buy it. I mean, is it a higher turnover thing that I don't think about buying a scissor? Like, why not? $2, right? I don't know, $20. I don't know how much is a scissor, right? But now I can actually activate it and get it in my shopping cart, whatever that is. Or exercise bands, or I don't know, a gym membership, because the response was about athleticism. Mm-hmm. What I just said is the new retail, or basically online retails, will be very, very interested in trying to bring the shopping cart experience and creating the ecosystems that search now is connected to e-com. And literally, I don't have to log into Amazon. I can just basically buy. The whole machinery takes care behind the scenes. And the implication supply chain, logistics, oh my gosh. This is such a wonderful scenario, right? So, and again, you and I trying to push it to be the optimists that we are technology-wise, but this is why I'm excited about this.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people will say that a lot of mom and pop shops or a lot of companies will go out of business because of these. Like if you look at it on the higher education side, like what do you think about like the impact there? It's like our products are our programs, right? So at the end of the day, like that's what we're selling. We're selling an outcome. We're selling a particular program. So how do you differentiate, and how do you come up on Google when somebody says, hey, what's the best way to get a job as a, I don't know, data analyst, for example, right? So how do I become a data analyst? And traditionally, you have a link of all the data analyst programs or the data analytics programs or whatever from colleges and universities that come up. And then you have to go through that and you understand it. Well, what does that new experience look like with AI overviews and kind of that AI experience?
So the way this will work, right, is that it would create the summary by itself using index data on the university website, right, that has a point of view on data analytics, and it gets blended with probably 3 others, and then that's the new thing. So you don't compete there. Your definition of data analytics, no. But you know where it happens is that, influenced by Perplexity, in that experience, what I can see is that it's referencing multimodal content, pictures of a campus, a data analytics person smiling, whatever the lifestyle is. So I think this is where I find the next play, that when we start posting content, the kill is not going to be in the click-through, so they land to my site. It's actually, how do I have imagery and multimodal, multimedia content that tells the story that makes someone want to basically spend time there in that basically endless loop of new generative AI content. So all of a sudden what I have is plain campus is not interesting. You know, how many of us have websites with the campus squad and park? But basically the humanization of data analytics in terms of graphics is going to be really important, because then I would click on that and then I start that rabbit hole type of thing. Does that make sense?
So it absolutely makes 100%, but I want to take that a little bit further, right? Or maybe that, like, as you were talking about, I was thinking, okay, when we do searches or when we look for something, we look for an outcome. We don't look for the tool. We look for the outcome, right? So when we do these questions or answers, it's like, how do I X, right? How do I achieve an outcome? So we're all looking for the outcomes. So universities, like, that's the only thing that they talk about what the thing is, the product. We don't talk about the outcome. So what you're saying,
It's outcome based, yeah.
is that the outcome is that person or that data analyst, like the story of that person and how they got a job and they're working at, you know, company X or Y or whatever, the logo grids of the companies that you send your people to, or the things that they're doing in the courses, for example, what the outcomes are, and some of them incredible. So thinking about it that way now aligns what we've been talking about marketing in higher education now for a long time, which is people or students cannot differentiate between your product and somebody else's. You're differentiating on the brand of the school, and you're differentiating on the value, and you're differentiating on the outcome. The value is really the outcome potential for that. So and now we're getting forced more and more, and we're seeing that the outcomes are really important, but we need to bake them into our content. Otherwise, Google will shut us off. Interesting.
Yeah. And this is where I really think that advertisement as a brand positioning versus product placement thing is really interesting, right? So I want the NYU brand to be recalled because that's where I spend time, right? So the NYU logo, purple, whatnot, I've seen it 7,000 billion times, so it's kind of hard-coded in my...
You bleed purple, I know.
Right. But that is basically what top of funnel branding activities do, right? It generates recall. So next time I'm thinking about data analytics, what is the association of data analytics with NYU? And then you work on top funnel. What I think this is going to do is going to make that type of exercise really hard, because who wants to see a logo, right? Today, tons of our advertisement, it's logo based because we want to push brand. What I think this is going to be more effective at is how do you start telling the story that captures advertisement in a really nuanced way, right? And then you don't know you're being marketed. So that's product or brand. Gary has this point of view that I think is fascinating. Every ad should look like an SNL skit. That you just want, you're just laughing, and then they hit you with the product, the brand, and you don't know they hit you with, right? But you know it's an ad. I mean, the first 10 seconds you don't know it's an ad, and then the remaining was like, oh, it became an ad. That is the type of maneuvering that I think we're going to start discovering, that the shift that happens in search pushes advertisements in universities. you're not particularly good at advertisement. I'm sorry. I know there's fantastic agencies out there, but we're still too trapped on the classical aspect of, hit me with the product, the brand. In other words, when our awesome faculty drives the brand, we have a problem. So starting to learn about this new phase of our advertisement and how the step of content can be pinged is really, very important. Artists, I'd like to end with one point, and I'd like us to riff here because there's been a lot of conversation about, the problems with these summaries, and more importantly, how this is changing the internet. You and I just spent, 5 minutes talking about how it's changing the digital advertisement and the monetization, those type of things. But the whole premise is that, this is going to change the internet, and that's a problem, and we don't know what to do. So what is your experience with the current internet? Because when I Google, search, Facebook, whatever it is that you do, your definition of internet, I just find that the prior internet, right, or the state of internet, it's not very healthy, right? Misinformation, I don't know what's real. So the aspect of this is changing the internet and we're in doomsday, I have a problem with, because where I'm standing today, and as I look at search, there's so much noise. And I just looked at a social media post that one of my favorite soccer players from Real Madrid is having an affair with another player. Like, my gosh, and this is basically what's at hand, that the amount of index data, it's dirty, right? So are we really surfacing a problem of tomorrow or a problem of today? So what's your point of view on this is going to be different and it's breaking the internet when I'm telling you, it seems to me that the internet is pretty broken already. So
It is.
What's the problem, everybody?
Yeah. I don't see it as a problem. I see it as the internet is already broken. There's a lot of content that we've been trying to filter out, or there's a lot of,
Right.
Dirty content. The worry is that with generative AI, that content is going to increase very, very quickly as well, because now you can generate more and more of it. So it's even going to pollute the current content even more. And the problem is there's a transition period, and during that transition period, there's a bunch of stuff that's going to surface that is not going to be ideal, but eventually we'll figure it out in terms of how do we suppress the things that are not relevant and the things that kind of should be on the edges, and then how do we bring things up that are more in tune and factual and kind of at the center. So I'm an optimist, but you're definitely seeing those edges and that dirty content come up. And if we're changing the way that we interact with the content, for sure it's going to come up, right? It's like that's 101. Think about the early days of Facebook and Twitter. It's like it was all about news and like it was all about that information. And then it turned out very, very quickly to be very, I won't say the word, I won't use the word dirty, but like very controversial, right? Like left wing, right wing, very political, very abusive, like a lot of things kind of came up that we needed to regulate on top of that. So the platforms have a little bit of a grace period in the beginning and regulation, and then they go into freak out mode. It's like, oh shit, how do we fix this? Because everybody is talking against it. And then they go into the maturity phase where, okay, now we figured it out and we're just playing whack-a-mole on new things that some people are trying to bypass, and it's kind of maintenance and maturity mode. I think that's where we're going to get, but it's going to take a couple of years for sure, because Gen AI is moving so quickly right now. So anything that Google does, it's not going to be good or good for us, because we're comparing it with the maturity and the trust that we have based on the search indexing that they're surfacing. But Gen AI is a completely different mode, and it's going to take us a couple of years to get the stability that we feel it's appropriate and learn how to surface that type of content.
I'd like to close with your word that generative AI starts to unpack in new horizons, summarization or search overviews. Stability is what's going to get us into a phase of this is working and this is basically making our lives easier. But then the adaptation of the ecosystem, whether it's advertisement, whether it's universities and things of that sort, it will come, and that's what makes this and a stable place. We're not there yet, everybody, but hopefully you're starting to see where this is leading. I hope you enjoy the conversation with Ardis and I as we try to unpack the pre-stabilized summaries that generative AI is introducing onto search. Ardis, you want to send us off?
Yeah, thanks everybody. As always, we appreciate your feedback. Please follow us wherever you listen and hit that follow button. Give us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and rate us, of course. We greatly appreciate it. Until next time.
Bye, everybody.
Generation AI is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you're going to like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing weekly, and we've got a wide range of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed leaders and professionals like you find their next big idea. They feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts, like Jamie Hunt, Seth Odell, Jenny Lee Fowler, Brian Gross, and many of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform that's helping institutions all over the country create meaningful, personalized, and engaging connections with their prospects and students. Learn more at element451.com.